I want to talk more about the opposition in Venezuela and what you think people outside Venezuela can do to aid the opposition. I want to talk about the ordinary life of the typical Venezuelan now. I want to talk about where that $1 trillion went. And maybe we can do that while talking about your claim, for example, that the Maduro government has basically also become a narco dictatorship. Now, you made a variety of extremely serious allegations, the misuse of $1 trillion certainly being one of them. But then you also said, well, the Maduro government is in bed with the narco cartels. And see, I don't think people in North America exactly understand what that means or exactly how nefarious those cartels are and what a danger they pose, well, to the stability of the entire Western Hemisphere. But then you also added to that the fact that Maduro is in cahoots with, well, Cuba, Iran, Russia, and then Hezbollah. And so this is a lot for people to digest because it sounds like a stew generated by a conspiracy theorist in a sense, right? Because there's almost nothing that is bad that you're not accusing the Maduro government of participating in. And so the easiest thing for a listener to do is to just say no to all that. So we should walk through those issues one by one. I guess the thing I'm most curious about to begin with, let's do it in this order. What the hell happened to $1 trillion? Like, that's an awful lot of money. Where do you think most of that, especially given that you have a 70% collapse in GDP and an 80% reduction in oil production? It's like, and then everybody in Venezuela is poor, and yet $1 trillion came pouring in. So what's your sense of who that money went to, and like what sort of people did that money go to, and what are they doing with that money?
So part of the money funded some very existentialist social programs at some point during the Chavez administration. But a large part of it went to fund revolutionary groups and political parties all over Latin America. We have to remember that the Castro vision, which is the important figure, I think, here, the Castro vision was to spread the revolution all over Latin America. In his worldview, what he was doing, believe it or not, is Christ's work on earth. Like, he was bringing paradise to earth. He said that literally many times. So Castro had been educated by the Jesuits in Cuba, and he believed that capitalism and, liberal democracy, individualism were the sources of corruption. That Christ was the first communist revolutionary. And this is, by the way, something very similar to what Pope Francis said at some point when he argued that it was the communists who thought like the Christians. He said that literally, Pope Francis, who is a Jesuit himself. So, and Castro was promising to create this, but this had to be an expansionist project. So when Chavez came to power and he had all of these resources in his pockets, plenty of them went to Cuba, of course, to sustain the island. But then he started supporting different regimes or movements and terrorist organizations all over Latin America. At some point, I had this conversation with former President Álvaro Uribe, who is also a good friend. At some point, he told me I was the only non-leftist, non-socialist president in most of South America. And it's true. And all of these regimes, even the Kirchner dynasty in Argentina, the corrupt Kirchner dynasty, got some, loans, special loans from the Venezuelan government when they needed money. So, and they stole a lot of money. I mean, the Chavistas and their families have billions of dollars on bank accounts in Europe, in the US, in different parts, and so it's amazing. You saw Ferraris in Caracas while people were starving. You have almost 8 million people have left Venezuela because you don't find things to eat. 8 million is a quarter of the population who have left the country because of the desperate situation. And you have over 80% poverty rate. And so a large part of the money, as I said, went to fund all of these movements, but also within Venezuela, they started creating a parallel army, the Círculos Bolivarianos. Chavez very early on understood, probably because Castro advised him to do so, that he needed a parallel troops in order to contain any threat that could come from within the army. And he was right. In 2002, the army staged a coup against Chavez, and Chavez was taken into custody. He was imprisoned. But then some generals, regretted the decision of getting rid of him, and they reinstalled Chavez. And then he, of course, used the muscle of the intelligence services of Cuba to purge the military as much as he could. But he was never entirely sure that there would not be traitors within the army. So he created the Círculos Bolivarianos, which are armed. And these are the guys, by the way, that you see nowadays in the videos attacking Venezuelans from the opposition who are just protesting on the streets, and they are shooting at them, they are taking them in and torturing them. Most of the people doing the dirty job are these Círculos Bolivarianos, which is the Bolivarian circles, and so that's a lot of money that went there also. And you can squander wealth with no end. I mean, it's if you are supporting other countries and you want to install regimes all over Latin America that are favorable to you. I mean, $1 trillion is not even a lot of money. But the worst part, and I finished the point with this, is that we saw people all over the West in the 2000s when it was already clear that Chavez was a dictator, that he was completely undermining the separation of powers. He was imprisoning the opposition, and he was violating human rights and so on. We saw very famous people like Joseph Stiglitz, for instance, coming to Venezuela and praising Chavez for what he was doing. And he did the same, by the way, with Kirchner's, with Fidel Castro. He has been a long-time supporter of the Castro dictatorship. And he now writes books called The Road to Freedom and pretends to be the savior of the West, or the killer or the undertaker of neoliberalism or something like that. But you could read the New York Times, you could read different BBC, you could see different news media outlets or even on television. They were sympathetic to Chavez when he started doing this, and it was already clear where he was going. So I share the frustration of the Venezuelan friends in the resistance, because the West has not shown, one standard for everyone. When it's the leftist, they support them, or they turn a blind eye to what they do.